The city lights of Nashville blurred into golds and reds on the slick pavement, the air dense with the scent of rain and diesel. Zariah Carter stood under the cracked awning of a closed dive bar, her fingers trembling as she refreshed her email for the 5th time. The lukewarm promise of music stardom that once seemed close enough to taste had dissolved into weeks of silence, rejection letters, and unpaid gigs at smoky bars where no one listened. Her suitcase leaned against her guitar case, scarred from years of open mics and bus rides. She wore a vintage denim jacket lined in corduroy, sleeves slightly frayed, and boots too worn to be fashionable but too familiar to replace. A single street lamp above her flickered, catching in her eyes the warm, soulful brown of someone who had dared to dream. Then, there it was. Live-in nanny needed, Texas Hill Country, 1 child, widowed father, must be able to sing, immediate placement, room and board included. Desperation wasn't new, but this was different. It wasn't giving up. It was regrouping, resting her tired heart. She bit her lip, clicked reply, and typed 4 words. I can be there. The taxicab kicked up clouds of dirt as it pulled away, leaving Zariah standing at the edge of the sprawling Santana ranch. The golden light of afternoon clung to the tall grass like honey, the air rich with the smell of leather, hay, and something faintly smoky. The ranch house was a 2-story stone and wood structure with a deep wraparound porch and a tin roof that pinged under the heat. A tire swing hung from a massive oak, unmoving in the stillness. To her right, a rust-red barn leaned slightly like it had grown tired over the years. Zariah adjusted the guitar strap on her shoulder and exhaled. A tall man stepped out onto the porch. He moved like someone who used to smile, but had forgotten how. His frame was strong, shoulders broad under a dusty button-up, sleeves rolled to his forearms. A wide-brimmed hat shadowed most of his face, but not the firm set of his jaw or the wary crease between his brows. Alejandro AJ Santana, white and Hispanic mix, sun-worn skin like bronzed leather, age 37, widow, former rodeo rider turned full-time rancher, and judging by his silence, not exactly thrilled to see her. Beside his leg peeked a small figure, big brown eyes, thin arms clutching a stuffed rabbit by the ears. Zariah bent low, offering a warm smile. Hey, sweetheart, I'm Zariah. You can call me Z. The little girl's curls bounced as she shyly stepped forward. You smell like vanilla, Zariah chuckled. That's my shampoo. You must be Lily. AJ nodded once. Lily, go show Miss Carter her room. Zariah caught it then, the way AJ's voice softened ever so slightly when he said his daughter's name. She followed Lily, who led her inside through a wooden door that creaked like a memory. The house smelled like cedar and old coffee. Dust caught in the corners of sunbeams. Family photos on the wall had faded with time, but the love in them hadn't. And for the first time in months, Zariah felt something close to possibility. After dinner, Zariah unpacked in the modest guest room with its quilted bedding and antique oak dresser. Lily sat on the floor playing with wooden blocks while Zariah carefully set her guitar in the corner. The scent of lavender sachets tucked in the drawers gave the space a welcoming calm, even though the walls were bare and the carpet worn in places. Lily jumped up. Want to see the horses? Zariah smiled, tugging on her boots. Lead the way, boss. Outside, the sun had slipped low, casting a rosy hue over the land. The two strolled across the property, Lily tugging her by the hand from the barn to the chicken coop to the paddock, naming each animal with childlike pride. Zariah soaked in every detail, the creak of the windmill, the sharp scent of hay, the warm hum of cicadas. AJ followed a few steps behind, arms crossed, boots crunching softly on the gravel. His gaze never left them. When they reached the fence line, Lily sprinted off to chase fireflies. She's comfortable with you already, AJ said, nodding toward his daughter. Zariah leaned on the wooden post. She's a sweet kid, curious and brave. He gave a small nod. We keep a routine here. Morning chores start at 6. Lily needs structure, someone to get her breakfast, take her through her workbook, keep her safe. I handle the livestock. You handle her. Zariah nodded, folding her arms. I can do that. Anything else? AJ hesitated. I added that part about singing because it calms her. My wife used to sing lullabies every night. After the accident, she stopped talking much. Music's the only thing that gets her to sleep. Zariah's expression softened. I get it. Music got me through my own mess, too. He looked at her then, really looked, the guardedness flickering. Just do your job, keep things quiet, and respect the space, he said. That's all I ask. Understood, she said, but her voice held warmth, not submission. Later that evening, Zariah sat on the porch steps with her guitar. The air was cooling, crickets tuning up for their nightly chorus. She strummed softly, the wood of the guitar warm against her belly, the notes carrying over the fields like prayer. Lily leaned against her shoulder, already half asleep. Zariah sang low and slow, "It's okay to cry if the pain runs deep. I'll hum your fears away while you fall asleep." AJ watched from the shadows, a whiskey glass in hand, invisible to her but fully present. His gaze was unreadable, but inside, something shifted. A thread of music wrapped around the stone he'd built in his chest and tugged. He hated it, and needed it. He turned before she could see him. Several days had passed since Zariah arrived at Santana Ranch. The once foreign routines of early mornings, dust-covered boots, and shared meals had quietly woven themselves into her day-to-day life. She had learned how to collect eggs without getting pecked, how to fold Lily's clothes with military precision thanks to AJ's influence, and even how to dodge the notoriously moody rooster. More importantly, Lily had begun to smile again, truly smile. Zariah's voice filled their small corner of the ranch with lullabies, silly songs about barn cats, and even improvised tunes about oatmeal and cow pies. In the mornings, AJ would nod a silent greeting over his coffee before heading out for chores, but occasionally Zariah caught his gaze lingering for just a beat too long. It was Lily's wide-eyed curiosity that had led Zariah to this moment, straddling a fence rail with shaky legs and an overly eager horse blinking at her. When Lily asked if they could go riding together like her mom used to, Zariah couldn't say no. She'd never been on a horse before, but the look in Lily's eyes made her want to try. Now she stood awkwardly beside a chestnut gelding named Jasper, fumbling with the reins and saddle, trying not to look like a complete amateur. AJ, a few yards away tending to fencing repairs, paused and watched her from under the brim of his hat. He'd spent the morning buried in work like always, never slowing, never stopping, burying himself in routine like it was the only thing tethering him to reality. He dropped the hammer into his toolbox and walked over, dusting off his gloves. "You never ridden before?" he asked, already knowing the answer. Zariah laughed nervously. "Nope, but I figured if Lily wants to go riding with me, I better learn. Can't be that hard, right?" He muttered something under his breath about stubborn women and impossible situations, then reached for the saddle horn. "You're holding the reins too tight," he said, "and you're standing too far back. You're gonna make him nervous." Zariah tried to adjust, but Jasper shifted again, snorting. AJ sighed. "All right, move over." He stepped behind her and in one fluid motion mounted the horse behind her. His arms slid around her waist, fingers adjusting the reins with practiced ease. She froze. Every nerve lit up. His chest pressed against her back, warm and solid. She could smell sweat, leather, hay, and underneath it all something undeniably masculine. "What are you doing?" "Showing you." His arm slid around her waist, hand adjusting the reins in her grip. "Let the tension go. You're trying too hard to control the horse and not enough to listen to it." Her breath hitched as she felt the movement of his chest against her back, his voice deep and close in her ear. The scent of cedar soap and sun-warmed skin wrapped around her, and for a moment the world went still. No bird song, no rustling grass, just the thud of her heart in her chest. Zariah swallowed. "You've got a real, hands-on teaching style. I've got a student who doesn't listen," he said, voice low, but the edge was gone, replaced with something softer, fonder. As Jasper trotted forward under his guidance, AJ leaned slightly to adjust her posture, his hand brushing the curve of her hip. The touch was casual, practical, but the electricity it sparked wasn't. She turned her head slightly, eyes searching his. "Do you do this with all your nannies?" He met her gaze, for a heartbeat too long, and then he answered, voice barely a whisper. "No." The word hung in the air between them like a secret. AJ cleared his throat and guided the horse into a smooth circle before stopping. Slowly he dismounted, then held out a hand to help her down. When she hesitated, he simply said, "Trust me." She did. When her boots touched the ground, she didn't let go right away. Neither did he. AJ looked at her then, not as a helper or a temporary solution, but as a woman who had brought life back into his daughter's eyes, who sang lullabies into the walls of his home, who laughed like sunlight and stood her ground like roots. He noticed the curve of her smile when she laughed with Lily, the steadiness in her hands, the resilience in her eyes. He'd buried so much beneath grief, but now her presence was unearthing it, quietly, gently, persistently. Zariah could feel the change too, in the way he steadied her, but also in the way his hand lingered a beat too long. She didn't say anything, neither did he, but something unspoken passed between them, and the distance between their hearts shrunk just a little more. Zariah padded barefoot into the kitchen, wearing a faded t-shirt and flannel pajama bottoms. She found AJ sitting at the table, a bottle of bourbon in front of him, hands steepled, eyes distant. The room was dimly lit by a single bulb above the sink, casting warm amber across the wood grain of the table. Outside, the wind rustled the trees, but inside, the silence stretched like a canyon. "You always sit in the dark like this?" she asked gently. He didn't look at her. "Sometimes the dark's easier." She poured herself a glass of water from the old ceramic pitcher, the quiet sound of pouring water the only answer for a beat. She watched him, really watched him, in a way she hadn't had a chance to before. His jaw was tight, and the lines around his mouth were deepened by years of holding in words. He wore grief like a second skin, quiet, worn, and almost invisible if you weren't paying attention. But Zariah was. She noticed everything. The way his shoulders always seemed to carry weight that wasn't just physical. The way he stared into space sometimes, like he was somewhere far behind them. The faint furrow in his brow that never quite left, like he was always bracing for something else to go wrong. She had been in this house nearly 2 weeks now, and in all that time she hadn't seen him smile. Not really, not for himself. He smiled faintly for Lily, those soft, fleeting expressions that belonged only to his daughter, but even those seemed carved out of obligation, like an echo of who he used to be. For himself, nothing. No joy, no pause, no breath. The man buried himself in ranch chores from sunup to sundown, as though keeping his hands full could keep the ache away. He fed the horses, fixed fence lines, ran into town for supplies, all with mechanical precision. The only time he stopped was when Lily needed him. He made time for her schooling, for her meals, for tucking her in, but never for himself, never to rest, never to breathe. Zariah leaned against the counter, glass in hand, and softened her voice. "I lost my mama when I was 10, she said quietly. Music helped me grieve, helped me speak when I couldn't." Finally, he looked at her. His eyes were darker than usual, rimmed with exhaustion and something heavier, something unspoken. "You think I don't talk 'cause I'm broken?" "No," she said, stepping closer. "I think you're trying to protect what's left." AJ leaned back in his chair, rubbing a hand over his face. "You talk like someone who's been through it." Zariah met his gaze, unflinching. "That's because I have." They sat there for a long moment, neither one speaking, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind of silence that held things: respect, curiosity, pain, the quiet acknowledgement that grief knew both their names, and neither of them had fully recovered from the way it knocked on their doors and never quite left. Zariah didn't press, she didn't pry. She simply stayed, and for a man like AJ, who hadn't let anyone stay in a long time, that meant more than he could say. It was the kind of day where the sun came and went behind soft gray clouds, leaving the sky drowsy with filtered light. Zariah had just finished folding Lily's laundry and was looking for a place to put away a spare set of blankets when she noticed a hallway she hadn't explored yet. The ranch house was big, but full of odd corners and quiet turns that didn't invite casual wandering. She hadn't meant to snoop, honestly she hadn't, but the door at the far end of that narrow hallway caught her attention. It looked different from the rest. Not because of its shape or color, but because of what it held: silence. A kind of stillness that hung in the air like the room was holding its breath. The doorknob jiggled under her fingers. Locked. Zariah hesitated, then crouched to peek under the crack. Faint dust, a sliver of light. She turned to leave, then paused. An old key hung on a nail near the hallway's linen closet. She'd seen it there days ago, and thought nothing of it. Her curiosity tugged now stronger than caution. She grabbed the key, fitted it into the knob, and slowly turned. The door creaked open on dry hinges, revealing a space frozen in time. It wasn't a bedroom, not anymore. Once, maybe. But now it felt like a shrine. The room smelled faintly of rose perfume and old cedar. Dust lay like snow over every surface. On one wall hung a framed photo of AJ and a woman, beautiful, with long chestnut waves and the same dimpled smile Lily wore when she was truly happy. They were standing beneath an oak tree, dressed in wedding clothes, her white gown flowing and his hand wrapped around her waist like he never wanted to let go. Zariah stepped inside carefully, heart tugging as she took in the details. A worn acoustic guitar leaned in the corner beside a now silent piano. Sheet music lay yellowed on the desk, marked with scribbles in blue ink. A jewelry box sat closed beside a dusty candle. And there it was, hanging behind a plastic cover along the far wall, the wedding dress, simple, elegant, preserved like a memory someone wasn't ready to let go of. She moved closer to the photo and traced a fingertip along the glass. AJ looked younger, less guarded, full of light. The woman beside him radiated joy, and their fingers were tangled in the way only people truly in love ever touched. Zariah's throat tightened. This room didn't just belong to someone. It was someone, a life interrupted, a story that had never finished its final verse. Behind her, the floor creaked. She turned quickly. AJ stood in the doorway, jaw clenched, eyes hard. The weight of his grief surged into the room like a storm front. "You shouldn't be in here," he said, voice low and sharp. I was just looking for a place to put the blankets, and I said, get out." His voice cracked like he'd raised it more from fear than anger. Zariah stepped back, hands slightly raised. "I didn't mean to pry. You don't get to mean anything in here," he snapped. "This isn't your business. You don't belong in this part of my life." Her pulse quickened. "AJ, it's not your place to look at her things, to stand there like you understand. You don't." Zariah's chest tightened. Her voice was soft but steady. "You're right. I don't know your whole story, but I do know what grief looks like." He turned away, hand braced on the doorframe, breathing heavy. His shoulders looked broader somehow, strained under invisible weight. "I see how you move through this place," she said, stepping forward. "You keep it running, keep Lily safe, keep every wall standing, but you don't keep anything for yourself. Not a moment, not a breath." He said nothing, just stared at the floor like it might swallow him. "You talk to your daughter, you feed the horses, you patch fences, you fix everything but the part of you that's still bleeding." AJ's jaw flexed. He didn't turn around, but something in him cracked. She could feel it. "You don't get to drown alone anymore, AJ. Not when that little girl needs her daddy back." His voice was barely a whisper now. "Don't make this about you." Zariah took one more step. "It's not. It's about feeling again." With that, she left the room, walking past him without another word. But her silence carried something heavier than confrontation, understanding. AJ stayed there for a long time after she was gone. The door to that room remained open. Not wide, but open. Just enough for memory, maybe something else, to breathe again. It had been nearly 3 weeks since Zariah first arrived, and the ranch had begun to feel less like a strange new world and more like a rhythm she could fall into. She'd found her pace. Mornings with Lily, afternoons shadowing chores, evenings filled with music, laughter, and quiet moments that stretched longer than they used to. AJ remained a mystery, guarded, brooding, and endlessly busy, but even mysteries had patterns. She noticed how he only smiled for Lily, and even then, faintly, how his eyes lingered not on people but on the horizon, as if he was always watching for something or someone that would never return. He filled his time with labor, fixing a busted gate, mucking stalls, hauling feed bags. He never once sat still unless Lily was curled beside him. Even then, his body stayed half tense, like rest itself was foreign to him. She had grown used to the weight of his silence, but not the way it made her want to unravel it. That evening, after Lily had been tucked into bed with a soft lullaby, Zariah wandered to the barn alone. The moon hung low and swollen in the sky, casting pale silver light across the fields. Inside, the barn was warm with the scent of hay and wood and horses. She sat on an old hay bale near the back, the cool wood of her guitar pressing against her ribs. Her fingers moved slowly, hesitantly over the strings, searching for something, and then her voice came, raw, uncertain, quiet but steady. The sound echoed soft against the rafters. "You can't outrun love, even on 1,000 acres. It'll find you hiding, in barns and heartbreak." The last note hung in the air, vibrating in her throat. Then, the creak of the barn door. Zariah stiffened. AJ stepped inside, his silhouette haloed in moonlight. He didn't speak at first, just watched her in the kind of silence that said more than words ever could. "You wrote that tonight?" His voice was low, unreadable. She nodded, setting the guitar gently beside her on the hay. He walked closer. His boots whispered over the straw, closer still until he stood just in front of her. Then in one slow motion he knelt right there at her feet, his hand reaching up to tuck a loose curl behind her ear. "You scare me," he said softly. Her breath caught. "Why?" "Because I want to feel again," he whispered, "and I don't know how to do that halfway." His eyes searched hers like a man standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous. Hope, maybe. He leaned in, slow, deliberate. His lips hovered above hers, so close she could feel the warmth of his breath, the hesitation in it. But he didn't kiss her. Instead, he rested his forehead against hers, exhaling a shudder that came from deep inside. And that, not a kiss, but the almost, was somehow more intimate, more telling, more raw. They stayed there in the quiet, wrapped in something fragile but deeply real. Her hands trembled slightly, resting on her thighs. His palms anchored to the hay beside her legs, like he didn't trust himself to touch her again. Zariah could feel his heart pounding, not just in his chest, but in the charged air between them. And she knew then, this wasn't just about attraction. This was about survival, about healing. He pulled back, finally, his eyes locked on hers, unreadable and full. "I should get back to the house," he murmured, already rising to his feet. She nodded but didn't move, her voice caught before it left her mouth. "AJ." He paused at the door, hand resting on the edge of the frame. "Yeah? You don't have to do this alone anymore." He didn't answer, but the way he hesitated before walking out told her. He'd heard her, even if he didn't know how to accept it yet. And Zariah, left alone in the barn with her unfinished song and a heart now echoing with new possibility, strummed the chord again. Softer this time, but braver. AJ didn't sleep. After the barn, after her song, after the not-quite kiss, he'd gone straight to the fields. The stars still hung overhead, bleeding into early gray dawn, and the soil was cold beneath his boots. He dug his hands into work, feeding the cattle, checking the fencing, pretending that the weight in his chest had nothing to do with the woman singing love back into the empty corners of his house. But every time he closed his eyes, he saw her, not just the way the moonlight caught the curve of her cheek or how her lips parted slightly when she was about to speak. It was more than that. It was her presence, her patience, her quiet persistence that chipped away at walls he hadn't even realized were still standing. She'd touched something dangerous, something alive. Zariah sat on the porch swing later that morning, a mug of tea cradled between her palms. The sun had begun to rise, throwing golden fingers across the fields. She wore AJ's old flannel, one she'd found hanging by the laundry room. Too big, sleeves rolled, but soft with wear. Lily still slept inside. The porch groaned as someone sat beside her. It was Elena, the housekeeper and AJ's cousin, who came twice a week to help with laundry and meals. A practical woman with a warm smile and sharp eyes, she rarely wasted words. "I saw you out here," Elena said, sipping from her own cup. "Didn't think you'd be up this early on your day off." Zariah offered a tired smile. "Didn't sleep much." Elena glanced at her, then looked out at the land. "This place will do that to you. Holds your memories like dirt holds rain." Zariah took a slow breath. "It's strange. I came here running from failure, from the silence in Nashville, but lately I feel like I'm waking up, like I forgot what it was like to matter to someone, even in quiet ways." Elena studied her for a long moment. "You matter to Lily." Zariah nodded. "I know, and maybe to AJ too. A little, maybe." Elena stood. "But be careful. That man's been drowning so long he doesn't know what air feels like. Just 'cause he reached for you last night doesn't mean he knows how to swim yet." Zariah watched her go, the words sitting heavy on her chest. She looked out across the pasture, where AJ moved like a ghost through the morning fog, hat low, shoulders squared. She wasn't here to save him, but maybe, just maybe, she could remind him how to feel again. The sky turned pewter with an incoming storm. The clouds had rolled in low, swallowing the horizon, and the air had that charged stillness, like the land itself was holding its breath. Zariah stood in the kitchen, helping Lily mix cookie dough. The little girl was chattering about horses and bedtime songs, flour dusting her cheeks like chalk. AJ hadn't come in all day, not for lunch, not to check on Lily, not even when the wind picked up and the windows began to rattle. "He always disappears when it's about to rain," Elena said, passing through the kitchen, arms full of folded laundry. Zariah glanced up. "Where does he go?" "Sometimes the barn, sometimes the North Trail. Nowhere good." Zariah hesitated, wiped her hands, and handed Lily a wooden spoon. "Stay with Elena, baby. I'll be right back." She found him in the barn, just as the first drops of rain hit the tin roof, soft at first, then louder, like 1,000 fingers tapping for attention. AJ was sitting in the corner stall, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it had betrayed him. He didn't look up when she entered. "You hiding from the rain?" she asked gently. "Or something else?" He didn't answer. She sat beside him, close but not touching. For a long time they just listened to the storm. Then his voice, hoarse. "The night she died, it was raining like this." Zariah turned slowly. His jaw was clenched, his eyes locked on a memory too sharp to look away from. She drove to town to pick up Lily's birthday cake, said she'd be back in 20 minutes. I offered to go instead. We argued. He swallowed hard. I said something stupid, that she was being dramatic. Zariah didn't move. Her breath stilled. She never came back. He finally looked at her, and now, every time it rains, I hear our last words instead of her voice. Zariah blinked, her eyes stinging. AJ, I built this place around that silence, he said. I filled every minute with chores and fences and livestock just to keep from remembering what I lost. And now, he looked at her, really looked. Now you're in my house, singing lullabies, laughing with my daughter, touching things I buried deep. And I don't know what to do with that. Zariah's heart thudded so hard she thought it might break her ribs. She reached for his hand. He didn't pull away. You don't have to do anything, she whispered. Not yet, just let yourself feel it. He nodded once, barely, but it was something. Later that night, Zariah packed half her suitcase. She wasn't leaving, not really, but she needed to know if she should, because her heart was opening too, in ways that terrified her. He wasn't just a broken man anymore. He was a man becoming again, and she had to decide if she was strong enough to stay through that becoming. Rain had passed, leaving the world hushed and rinsed clean. Morning sunlight broke through the clouds in gold ribbons, kissing the dewy grass and steam rising from the fence posts. Zariah hadn't slept. Her half-packed suitcase still sat open on the bed. The melody from the night before haunted her, hovering at the edge of her memory like a question left unanswered. She tiptoed downstairs to make coffee and found something waiting for her on the kitchen table, a small leather-bound notebook. Inside, the first page read, Songs my wife used to sing, for Lily. For you, if you'll stay. AJ. Her throat tightened as she flipped through the pages, lyrics most half-finished. Some scribbled in a more delicate hand, clearly his late wife's. A few lines were crossed out and rewritten in AJ's blocky, hesitant script. The last page was blank, except for one line. Maybe it's time for new songs. She clutched the book to her chest, overwhelmed by the vulnerability in it. It wasn't grand or romantic, but it was real. And it was his first true offering. Later that morning, while Zariah sat quietly on the porch, Lily climbed into her lap without a word. The little girl rested her head against Zariah's chest, thumb in her mouth. I like when you sing, Lily mumbled. When you don't sing, the house gets too quiet. Zariah smoothed her curls. Sometimes people don't feel like singing, baby. Lily looked up, brown eyes wide. Daddy didn't feel like living for a long time. But now, I think he's starting to. Zariah froze. Lily pressed her small hand over Zariah's heart. Don't go. If you leave, I think he might forget how. Tears slipped down Zariah's cheeks before she could stop them. She kissed Lily's forehead and held her close, her chest rising and falling like a quiet promise. Inside, AJ stood just beyond the doorframe, hand against the wall, his own breath caught. The house was quiet, Lily long asleep, the crickets outside humming their soft rhythm into the warm Texas night. Zariah padded barefoot down the stairs, drawn by the comfort of a mug of tea and maybe just a little peace from the ache in her chest. She had almost left, almost packed up and disappeared before anyone could miss her. But then Lily's words echoed in her head again, and AJ's notebook. She couldn't forget that. The kitchen was dimly lit by the amber glow over the stove. She reached for the kettle and found AJ already there, leaning against the counter with 2 mugs in hand. I figured you couldn't sleep either, he said softly, pushing one toward her. Didn't expect company, she murmured with a faint smile, fingers brushing his as she took the mug. His hand lingered. They stood in silence, the distance between them thick with unspoken things. Steam swirled from their cups. Her heart beat like a drum in her ears. AJ finally broke the silence. You were going to leave. Zariah looked down. Yeah. Why? She took a long sip before answering. Because staying here, it started to feel good. Too good. And good things don't usually last for people like me. He waited, patient. I've spent years chasing a spotlight that never had room for me. Nashville never saw me, just another black girl with a guitar and a pretty voice. I was broke, exhausted, invisible, but it was the only dream I knew how to want. Her voice cracked. And then I came here. I started to feel again. I started to care. About Lily, about you, this place. She looked up, eyes shimmering. And that scared me more than failing in Nashville ever did. AJ set his cup down. I didn't ask for you to change your dreams. No, but you made me question them. He stepped closer, and if you questioned them, maybe they weren't the right ones anymore. Zariah's breath caught. I was surviving before you came, he said, voice low and steady, going through the motions. But then I started listening again, breathing again, watching Lily laugh again. And that's because of you. She shook her head slightly, tears rising again. I don't know how to choose. I feel like I'm split in two. AJ's fingers gently took her mug and set it aside. Then, wordlessly, he reached for her hand and pulled her into the center of the kitchen. No music, no words, just the hum of the fridge and the song of their breath. Dance with me, he said. Her laugh was soft, nervous. You don't dance. Tonight I do. They moved slowly, his hand at the small of her back, her cheek against his chest. He was warm, steady, and she could hear the strong thrum of his heart beneath her ear. Their bodies moved in sync, barely shifting, but it was enough. The weight of weeks settled into the sway, and then he tilted her chin up. Eyes met, breaths mingled. He leaned in, and this time he didn't stop. The kiss was quiet at first, tender, hesitant, but then something broke open between them, a dam of grief, desire, fear, and longing. Zariah's fingers curled in his shirt, and AJ's hand cupped the back of her neck, deepening the kiss until there was nothing left between them but heat and truth. His lips were warm and urgent, her body melted into his, needing the contact, needing to be seen this fully. When they finally pulled back, breathless, foreheads pressed together, her hands trembled. AJ looked into her eyes. Whatever you're chasing, it doesn't have to be alone anymore. Zariah closed her eyes, the warmth of his words melting something in her chest. She wasn't sure what tomorrow held, but for tonight, for this moment, she chose to stay. The scent of kettle corn and cinnamon apples filled the air as the Oak Hollow Harvest Fair came alive under a watercolor sky. Strings of golden lights crisscrossed between wooden booths. Hay bales lined the edges of the main path, and the laughter of children echoed through the cool autumn breeze. Zariah walked beside AJ and Lily, the little girl perched on AJ's shoulders, waving at every familiar face they passed. Zariah wore a soft flannel tied at the waist over a flowing mustard-colored skirt, her locks pulled back with a sunflower scarf. She looked like she'd always belonged here, like Texas had slowly wrapped its arms around her. Looks like half the county's here, Zariah said, scanning the crowd. AJ smirked. Whole town shuts down for this fair. Even the feed store closes early. You gonna show me off or keep pretending I'm just the hired help? She teased, elbowing him gently. He leaned close, his whisper sending warmth down her spine. After the way you kissed me in that kitchen, I'd be a fool not to show you off. She blushed, biting her bottom lip as he reached for her hand, fingers tangling, palms pressing like they were made for it. They stopped near the main stage where a few folks were tuning instruments. A woman with a clipboard approached. You're Zariah, right? She asked. AJ's told us you sing. We had someone drop out last minute. You think you'd be up for closing out the night? Zariah's heart stuttered. She hadn't stood on a real stage in months. The thought twisted something inside her, part fear, part longing. I don't know if I'm the right pick, she started. You're more than the right pick, AJ said, squeezing her hand. Lily looked down from his shoulders. Sing, Z, please? Zariah looked from AJ's steady gaze to Lily's wide eyes. Then she exhaled. I'll do it. The final act was announced as the crowd gathered near the bonfire. Lanterns swayed in the trees. Zariah stepped onto the wooden stage, her guitar slung across her body like an old friend. She took the mic. Her voice trembled. I used to think my songs only mattered if strangers clapped for them, but lately I've been learning that it's the people who sit with you when you're quiet that make you feel like music again. She strummed the first chord. There's a fire in the fields where I buried my pride, and a home I found in the tears I tried to hide. Didn't know healing looked like you. Didn't know freedom smelled like hay and firelight too. The crowd quieted, drawn in by the rawness in her voice. AJ stood near the back, arms around Lily, his eyes locked on Zariah with something like awe. Every line was a confession. Every chord was a goodbye to the life she'd once chased, and a hello to the one she'd stumbled into, one she was finally choosing. When she finished, there was a pause, and then thunderous applause. Cheers. Someone whistled. Zariah smiled, the kind that lit her whole face. The spotlight didn't feel like a burden tonight. It felt shared. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed and stars blinked above, AJ walked up to her. "You were breathtaking." She laughed nervously, brushing a tear from her cheek. It felt different this time, like I wasn't singing to prove anything, just to say what I've been holding in. He stepped closer. "You said everything I've been too scared to." She looked up at him, the fair's fading lights reflecting in her eyes. "I think I've been scared of being happy," she whispered. "Because if it ends, I'm afraid I won't survive the fall again." He tucked a loose curl behind her ear. "Then don't fall. Just land. Right here. With us." She closed her eyes and leaned her forehead against his. "I think I already have." The morning light filtered gently through the kitchen curtains, casting golden stripes across the table where Zariah sat cradling a steaming mug of tea. Her throat was still warm from last night's singing, her body aching in the pleasant way that only comes after you've poured your soul out into something that mattered. She hadn't expected the fair to crack her open like it had. The applause still echoed in her memory, not like the hollow claps of bar crowds back in Nashville, but real appreciation. And not just for her voice, but for her. Here, in this tiny town, people had listened. AJ had listened. His eyes never left her during that performance, not even once. Her phone buzzed where it sat on the counter, and her stomach twisted before she even picked it up. "New message. We saw your video. We'd love to chat." Ren records. She stared at it. It was everything she'd wanted. A door she'd knocked on for years finally cracked open. And yet, her chest didn't swell with joy. It tightened. Something wrong? She looked up and found AJ in the doorway, barefoot, still wearing the flannel he'd fallen asleep in. His hair was slightly tousled, and he looked so right in this space it made her heart ache. "I got a message," she said quietly, "from a label." His face didn't shift right away. "A good one?" She nodded, eyes flicking away. "They saw the fair video. Want to talk. It could mean finally making it." AJ moved toward her slowly. "That's what you came here trying to find, isn't it?" She let out a shaky laugh. "Yeah, and now that it's here, I'm not sure if I want it anymore." She pressed her fingers to her temple. "I don't know what's wrong with me. For years, I've fought for that kind of call, and now, I feel like I'd be walking away from something real if I left." AJ pulled out the chair across from her, sitting down with the kind of calm that came from having fought his own share of battles. "You're not broken, Z. You're changing. Doesn't mean your dream wasn't real. But maybe it was never the whole story." She looked at him, really looked, and saw a man who had learned to live with loss, with quiet love, with the sacred rhythm of land and daughter and second chances. "But it's still a part of me," she whispered. "That dream, the stages, the lights, I still hear it when I close my eyes." "I know," he said softly, "and I'll never ask you to kill it. Just don't walk away from this without knowing what you'd be leaving behind." She nodded, the war in her chest raging louder. Her eyes burned. AJ reached across the table and took her hand. "Whatever you decide, Z, I won't hate you for it. I just hope you don't forget the sound of Lily's laugh, or the way this place made you feel safe when nothing else did." Tears welled up and fell before she could stop them. "I'm scared." "So was I," he said, "but I'm not anymore. You taught me that." Outside, Lily's giggles echoed as she chased the barn cat, oblivious to the grown-up world unraveling inside. Zariah squeezed AJ's hand, and for the first time, she realized that maybe dreams didn't die when you chose a different life. Maybe they just changed shape. The city felt colder than she remembered. Zariah stepped off the bus with a duffel slung over her shoulder, the tall buildings of downtown Nashville glinting like promises. She used to look at this skyline and feel fire in her chest. Now, it was a strange kind of ache. The label's office was sleek. Polished concrete floors, trendy lighting, gold records framed on the walls, the kind of place she once dreamed about. She waited in the reception area with her hands clasped tightly in her lap, heart beating fast but hollow, when a woman in a crisp blazer ushered her in. Zariah walked into the meeting like a version of herself she hadn't worn in a while. Confident, professional, hopeful. They played the video from the harvest fair, her standing barefoot under the string lights, AJ and Lily just out of frame. "She's authentic," the executive said. "Untrained but raw. Country soul. We think you could be the next Brandy Carlisle if you work with our team." They handed her a packet. Tour dates, studio time, branding notes. "We'd need you here in Nashville by the end of next month." Zariah blinked. 1 month? Her mind raced. Lily's workbook, the smell of hay in the barn, the way AJ's hand felt at the small of her back, the sound of their laughter during tea. Quiet love, the kind you don't find on tour buses or in hotel rooms. She flipped through the packet. The font was too sharp, the timelines too fast, and the smile on her face wasn't real. "Can I think on it?" she asked. The executive raised an eyebrow. "This isn't the kind of opportunity that waits long." "I know," she said softly. "But I need to be sure." That evening, she walked past the old dive bar where she used to perform for tips and beer tickets. The neon sign flickered overhead. She slipped in, guitar in hand, and played a few songs. No one clapped. No one really listened. It hit her all at once. She had already outgrown this place. Her dream hadn't died. It had evolved. She didn't want the spotlight anymore. She wanted meaning, roots, a family, a place where her songs weren't just entertainment, but healing. That night, she slept in her old roommate's apartment on a worn couch that smelled like incense and microwave burritos. But all she could think about was home, not Nashville, the ranch. The gravel crunched under the bus tires as it rolled to a stop at the edge of the ranch. Zariah stepped off slowly, the Texas sun spilling gold across the fields, washing everything in a soft, forgiving light. She carried nothing but her duffel, her guitar, and a truth she could no longer ignore. AJ was on the porch, oiling the hinges on the screen door. He looked up, his eyes locking with hers, and froze. Zariah's heart pounded. "I thought you left," he said, standing fully. "I did," she replied, "but not for long." He moved toward her, boots thudding softly on the steps. "You came back," she nodded, eyes glistening. "Because I finally realized I was running toward something I already had." He stood a few feet away, hands in his back pockets, guarded but hopeful. "I used to think success meant standing on a stage, hearing thousands cheer, but it's not that, not anymore. It's singing Lily to sleep. It's dancing barefoot in the kitchen. It's learning what it means to feel safe with you." AJ exhaled, the tension in his shoulders releasing like a storm that had finally passed. "You're saying no to Nashville?" Zariah took a shaky breath. "I'm saying yes to this, to us, to what we've started to build." And then he was there, closing the space, wrapping his arms around her so tightly she forgot what loneliness felt like. His lips found hers in a kiss that spoke of longing, of second chances, of everything unsaid finally breaking free. He pulled back, searching her eyes. "You still scare me, Zariah Carter." She smiled through her tears. "Good, because you scare me too. But that means we're doing it right." The barn was strung with soft white lights. Lily twirled barefoot in the grass outside, giggling as fireflies lit up around her. Inside, the air was warm with laughter and fiddle strings. The community had gathered for the first Santana Ranch spring dance, a tradition AJ said Zariah had brought back to life. She stood near the edge of the barn floor, wearing a flowing cotton dress, curls pulled up with wildflowers. Her guitar leaned against the old hayloft ladder, unused for now. AJ slipped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "Everyone keeps asking when we're setting a date," he murmured against her ear. She turned, her smile soft. "Let's not rush. We've already got the good part." Lily ran up, cheeks flushed. "Come dance with me, Z." Zariah took her hand, and AJ took the other. They danced together, under the stars, surrounded by laughter and love, and in that moment, boots scuffing the wood, fiddle strings soaring, Lily's laughter echoing like bells, Zariah realized this was her song. Not one she'd written, but one she lived. You can't outrun love, even on 1,000 acres. It'll find you hiding in barns and heartbreak. Life doesn't always follow the path you planned, But sometimes love shows up in the silence, in the stillness, and in the space between your dreams. Zariah thought she had to chase fame to be seen, but the truth is, sometimes the greatest stage is a quiet kitchen dance under a tin roof. If this story touched your heart, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. And don't forget to turn on that bell notification so you never miss a new romance that might just heal your soul.